From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The House passes a $1.2 trillion bill to fund most of the federal government for the coming 6 months. But most Republicans vote no, with Marjorie Taylor Greene filing a motion to attempt to oust new Speaker Mike Johnson. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, editorial board members Kate Batchelder Odell and Mene Ukwe-Barua. Almost halfway through the fiscal year, the House is moving now to pass a budget under regular order instead of the kind of stopgap continuing resolutions appropriations bills that have kept the government running for the first 6 months. House Speaker Mike Johnson is applauding this $1.2 trillion package. Here's a piece of what he said. House Republicans achieved conservative policy wins, rejected extreme Democrat proposals, and imposed substantial cuts while significantly strengthening national defense. He went on to say that this was the best achievable outcome in a divided government, noting that we have a Republican House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democrat in the White House. But the vote in the House on this spending package was 286 to 134, and more Republicans saying nay than saying aye. Let's listen to one of those Republicans, Congressman Chip Roy, before the vote.
Well, here we are again. The swamp is back in full force. We have a 1,000-page bill of $1.2 trillion filled with all manners of spending priorities that are at odds with the American people. That's what we have in front of us. This bill is over 1,000 pages long. It contains hundreds of pages of report language, 1,400 earmarks, and we've had about 24 hours to review it. That is not the way to do business. And the American people and American families are the ones left holding the bag.
Kate, maybe the best place to start, as we often do, is at the beginning. So can you give us a sense of what is in this bill? What are the pluses that each side is claiming and the negatives that are being discussed?
Yeah, so this is the last 6 appropriations bills for the year. Congress handled the other package earlier. And so it encompasses national defense, homeland security, labor and health and human services. And both sides are claiming some discrete wins here. Republicans are pretty focused on claiming that they got more detention beds, about 41,000, and when Biden requested only 25,000 in his budget request. And they're also claiming that they got money for funding about 22,000 border agents, which is consistent with the levels that are asked for in H.R. 2, the Republican immigration package. So Republicans are claiming some narrow wins on the border. Democrats are focusing mostly on the domestic priorities that they were able to get $1 billion more for childcare, and Head Start is a big one that Democrats are touting. Now, this is not an excellent bill because anytime that you jam these bills together in large packages, this isn't an omnibus where they pass all 12 bills at once, but they broke it up really into 2 groups of 6, and it's not much of an improvement. But we live in a world of available alternatives, and the options here were the following. You could keep funding the government on a stopgap measure, continuing resolution for the rest of the year, and a lot of the House fiscal conservatives wanted to do this. The damage of that would have been to the national defense budget because it couldn't get the 3% increase that it was supposed to get with a continuing resolution. And it would waste a lot of time and energy, impair our ability to train and exercise. Not a great outcome. And the other option was to shut down the government. And what follows that, the next time that works for Republicans will be the first time. So it's not a great outcome here to have this bill that is being rammed through, that is ladled down with some pork and earmarks, but it may be the best outcome given narrowly divided government, Republicans with a 2-vote majority in the House.
The question of alternatives is always the one that I have for these backbenchers who are out calling this another deal with the swamp, Mene, because I agree those are the only alternatives I see is another continuing resolution, which, as Kate says, would wreak havoc on the spending priorities that including some Republicans have, such as the Pentagon. Or the alternative is this kind of government shutdown, and we were now days away from a deadline that would have put that into effect. And I just don't understand the stance of some of these folks that if only we hang on a little bit longer and push a little bit more, Democrats are going to cave. Chuck Schumer in the Senate is going to cave. President Biden is going to agree to sign the bill that he doesn't want to sign. I think more likely is what Kate lays out, the kind of politics that are going to backfire on Republicans. And don't pretend that this hasn't happened before. I don't think they can, because we had some shutdowns in recent years. And my memory of the history there is it was Republicans often saying, if we just hang on a little bit more, we can get what we want. The government shut down. People were mad about that. It backfired. There was a backlash on the Republicans who had made that choice. And by the way, when they shut down the government, the people who are off end up getting back pay later. So it's not as if this is some huge budget savings anyway. And so I also think it's fascinating, Monet, here. We have a new Speaker of the House, and he is not some kind of establishment squish. Mike Johnson is a real conservative, I think. And yet when he gets in the Speaker's office and he gets the Speaker's gavel, he ends up making the same kinds of hard choices that previous speakers have had to make, including Kevin McCarthy. I think that says something about the dynamics of what it is like to be in that office, trying to make sure that you make the choices that are good not only for your district, but good for the country and good for the Republican conference as a whole.
Exactly. I want to start with the first part of what you said regarding the politics of a shutdown and the strategy of the conservative members of the House Republican caucus who tend to always push these budget fights in that direction. Really, history shows us that a shutdown benefits the group that comes into it with the most credibility. I think when Democrats show that they are more serious compared with Republicans about actually governing and seem to have their act together and be able to present a united front, they tend to be the beneficiaries of a shutdown because they're able to blame the chaos in Washington on intransigent Republicans. And that was true even during the Obama administration, when you had under John Boehner a relatively unified House Republican caucus. Today, I think it's even more true because House Republicans have tagged themselves with the brand of being extremely disorderly, having deposed their own speaker shortly into the beginning of his leadership of the party. And so I think that even moderate watchers of Washington politics, not only your insiders, but your average voter, is aware of the turmoil that House Republicans have gone through over the course of the past couple of years. And any shutdown fight would be very quickly pinned on them by President Biden and by Chuck Schumer. And it's very likely that in the end, they would reconvene and feel the pressure to come to a solution on funding the government that would be even worse than what their last ask was before going into the shutdown. And so it's unlikely that Republicans could benefit in a situation of that kind. I think Mike Johnson knows that. He's playing with a weak hand from the start and thinks even cutting a deal, which is not the sort of thing that would be pleasing to most Republican voters, is better than going into that chaos and knowing Republicans are going to take the blame. But more broadly, I do think that Mike Johnson knows that basically he is, up until perhaps now, in a tacit agreement with the conservative members of the House Republican caucus that he is going to be able to strike these suspension deals to keep the government running. They want to be able to tell their constituents that they held a hard line, but I think they probably know that it's unlikely that they're going to get a better representative of their party who is more conservative and who is more pleasing and acceptable to their voters than Mike Johnson. They've already gone through one round of it, deposing Kevin McCarthy, who was easier to tag as an establishment Republican who didn't share conservatives' priorities. I think Mike Johnson has a good deal of credibility with the public, and so there's little to benefit from them in going through another round of searching for new leadership. But nonetheless, it seems as if we might be headed towards Republican infighting and at least a questioning of Johnson's leadership. Even if he isn't deposed from the speakership, he's going to have to wrangle members to his defense. In terms of the outcomes, as Kate went through on policy, this strategy has clearly been hurting Republicans, and it seems as if it could lead to even further blows to their national reputation, because we're returning to the same chaotic infighting that we've been going through for the past couple of years.